And then I will do the introduction in just a few seconds after that.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
How do you do
Going
that?
on mute.
And I'd like everyone else to please be on mute. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, My Brother's Keeper, Embracing Latino Males, a webinar sponsored by the National Compadres Network. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. We've taken a screenshot of an example of the attendee interface. You should see something like that looks like the one on your computer desktop. See here where you can see where you are muted and where you can select telephone or mic and speakers. If you have selected the option to dial in, please make sure that's also selected in your panel. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation, and we will collect these and address them during the Q&A session. At the end of today's presentation, I would like to introduce our moderator, Jerry Tello.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Depending on where you're at, this is Jerry Tello from the National Compadres Network, and we'd like to thank you for taking the time to share with us this opportunity to lift up the issues related to communities and families, and specifically to young men of color. And on this webinar, we have several focuses today. But before we do that, I want to, in the traditional way of all people, of all ancestors, just to give thanks for the day, for another day of life. Give thanks to all the ancestors and to people of all colors, of all ways, of all roots, of all ways. We thank the universe for another day of life, for all the elements. And as my grandmother would do, she would offer a blessing that way. And so we start in that good way. And we offer this presentation today in a good way, meaning attempting to offer a good blessing and healing to our community, but also to speak up because we recognize that many of our communities are suffering and struggling. So the webinar today will cover several things. The focus, one is to recognize that Latino males compose the largest number of boys of color in the nation. And therefore, we want to encourage My Brother's Keeper and other efforts like this nationally to include culturally based assets and social systemic challenges of Latino youth as a core fundamental element in designing this effort. The second part is reinforcing the importance of expanding the focus on merely academic education achievement to what in our culture we call la educación, which encompasses the goal of developing honorable, educated, and responsible young men that can succeed in life and that have pride in their culture but respect others' cultures as well. The third is to reinforce the need to directly address the social historical trauma and the transformational healing that men and boys of color carry, and the generational responsibility that it will take to address these issues. Next slide, please. Also, they emphasize the importance of transforming the juvenile justice system, mental health, educational and social service systems to ones that incorporate cultural humility and transformative healing and civic engagement. Fifth is to emphasize the significance of culturally based proven efforts, such as MCN, National Boys and Women's Miller Institute, and our evidence-based curriculum, Noble. And finally the Healing Generations Framework, which includes elders and wisdom keepers of color to guide this multicultural effort. We must come together as people of all races, of all ways, to embrace the needs and lead the next generation in a good way. So we have the National Compadres Network obviously has been around for a long time, since 1988, doing this work, and you can see our mission. We bring a cadre of experts from across the country, and we incorporate a whole number of organizations that have a long history, which includes the philosophy of many of our ancestors and our civic leaders that have come before us. And we work in partnership to do all of this. So we thank you and very humbly offer today's webinar this way. Today we have a listing of very recognized and all people that dedicate themselves to community. And so today we will begin. We're very, very honored and pleased to have the Honorable Congressman Tony Cardenas with us. And Congressman represents the 29th District of California. He is a national expert in juvenile justice reform with a proven track record of enacting unprecedented legislation for over 17 years. Congressman Cardenas has successfully worked on effective youth development and juvenile justice policy, and has long been a champion of Latino youth. And I really want to thank our Congressman for taking this time. We know it's a very busy time for us, but we thank you for your dedication and your work, and for taking this time to speak to us on this very issue that you've championed for many, many years. Welcome, Congressman Cardenas.
Thank you. Can somebody acknowledge that you can hear me?
We can hear you fine.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jerry, for that very kind and warm welcome. I do appreciate the invitation to participate in this webinar today. And I also want to thank the National Compadre Network for putting this together to talk about My Brother's Keeper, the initiative. And I think it's important that we recognize that National Compadre Network is something that is important not only to the Latino community, but to the country as a whole. And we live in a diverse country, but at the same time, as you pointed out, Jerry, Latinos make up the largest segment of youth. Latinos and Latinas make the largest segment of youth in our country. My Brother's Keeper has an important mission and of helping African American and Latino youth reach their full potential. Programs that focus on youth development are very important to communities, certainly the community I represent as well. And I always welcome any effort whatsoever that creates partnerships between foundations and businesses and communities to enhance the scope to reach the full potential of this work. And I'm definitely committed to helping in any way to make sure that every single one of those sectors understands the mission and understands their contribution. As this new initiative rolls out, I'm committed to ensuring that the needs of the Latino community remains a priority. It's essential that Latino youth receive community-based efforts and wraparound services that support not just them, but their entire families. And we all know the real work that's being done in this country that is actually fruitful and successful is the holistic approach. Addressing these problems by working with the family as a whole is really important, not only to the Latino community, but to the entire country. In recent years, we've seen a great results of these kinds of approaches. For example, in Los Angeles, we've been tackling these issues such as school attendance and youth violence prevention and gang intervention as well. My Brother's Keeper focuses on areas on which I've long been an advocate as a legislator for close to 17 years now. In my career, I was 6 years in the State Assembly in California, and I passed the Cardenas Act. It was the most aggressive funding of intervention prevention programs in the country, and I was able to fund it at $121 million in its inaugural year. And I thank my predecessors in the legislature to keep funding it and above $100 million a year for the last 12 years. In addition to that, on the LA City Council, we were the first government to define what intervention was and to actually put it in statute in the city of Los Angeles. And now we've been seeing appropriate respect and duplications for intervention efforts, gang intervention efforts throughout the country and also throughout the world. This success of advancing youth development in Los Angeles and juvenile justice policy, I didn't do it alone. And the reason why I think it's important that we come together on this conference call today is to make sure that we continue to work together, not only in our local communities, but throughout the country. And as a congressman, I make it my priority, and I think it's my obligation to make sure that juvenile justice policy is something that I continue to work on and dedicate myself full time. I look forward to working with the Obama administration and the National Compadre Network and any other organization to make sure that my Brother's Keeper promotes culturally based responses to support Latino boys and young men. Thank you for coming on this call and for coming together like this to make sure that we together are understanding our role in addressing Latino youth in particular, and for helping shine a light on the opportunities that are possible for them through my Brother's Keeper. Again, I look forward to my Brother's Keeper shaping up into something that, according to the President's promise, will include fully Latino youth and African American youth. And we all know the disproportionate share of burdens that those children have in the justice system, both as juveniles and adults. And I think that together we're going to be able to make a difference not only on policy, but also programs, comprehensive programs in every single one of our communities. However, we need the resources to do it, and I think that the President's announcement is something we should all welcome, yet at the same time it's something that only together, through the grassroots knowledge and efforts of every single one of us, we're going to be able to make it what it should become, which is comprehensive, inclusive, and all-encompassing for all of our children of color. So once again, thank you all very, very much. Oh, one more thing. Virginia Zigras is in my DC office, and she's also on the call as well. And she is the person that I've hired to dedicate herself 100% to the issue of juvenile justice on my team. Mm. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. Really appreciate your long-standing work and your example, and we look forward to working beside you as we continue this effort. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you. You can count on it.
All right. Well, as stated by Congressman Cárdenas, this is a very important issue, and we recognize and we want to acknowledge the Obama administration and for lifting this issue up of boys and men of color. At the same time, we recognize that there's different points of view and there's different life views as well. We recognize in our traditional culture that we can't lift boys without lifting girls, without lifting elders, without lifting the family and lifting the community. And I want to say from the beginning that we have a commitment to all boys and on all youth and all families. But today we really want to talk about the specific needs of Latino families, the Latino community, and Latino males. And what we have seen so far, and something that we face often, is a point of view that sometimes focuses on certain needs, and a lot of focus has been on educational achievement. And what we are recognizing over the last 20 years of working in communities is we want young men to succeed educationally, but we want more. We want young men that are honorable, that are respectful, because we also see in communities problems, of violence, of drugs, of alcohol, of trauma. But we also see that internalized oppression then sometimes leads to young men hurting women and children and families as well. And we want honorable young men that don't just graduate from college, but really are honorable in the larger sense of being good family members and good companions and good fathers and good sons and good contributors to society. So we recognize that there's different views of what success is, and what I'd like to just share with you from the beginning is, because we've heard a lot about academic achievement, which is real important in all of our families. Many of our families have struggled, have sacrificed, have fought, so that we have the opportunity for educational achievement. But in our homes, our grandmothers and our mothers really stated something more. And there's always this duality, and so we would like to really challenge my Brother's Keeper and other efforts to really expand the view and to embrace something much larger. And so I want to just share with you, the contemporary point of view in terms of Western contemporary education as opposed to the indigenous traditional educación. When I grew up, my grandmother was interested in us being bien educados. Bien educados, of course, translated means well educated. But what it really meant is something much larger. And when she sent us to school, it confused me a little bit because there was a more narrow focus. And so the Western contemporary education is real important. And if we can go to the next slide, but it really focuses on a certain number of aspects and a trajectory of how you go about achieving success. And so we send our children, in order for their development, to educational institutions to get educated. And they learn facts and constructs, they learn theory, and they learn all the history and all the things about math and reading and all of those things that are essential, that are very, very important. And we hope our goal, and many families want their children to get a degree or a credential, and are very proud, some maybe the first to graduate from high school or even go to college. And of course we want that. But the goal becomes then having hierarchical status, meaning now you have a degree, now you know more, and unfortunately sometimes if this other part is not shared, then sometimes indirectly it makes some young people going to educational institutions feel that they have more knowledge than even their grandmother, who doesn't read or write but has a significant wisdom, or their mother or father that works in the fields or works in the streets, trying to support them, but can't read or write at the same level. And so this hierarchical status, then the goal is you can have power, you can have access, you can have the ability to move within systems, which is very important. But the goal is then material wealth. So you can have access to be able to buy things and buy cars and have houses and be able to buy what you want and live in a better neighborhood and all of that, and that's success. And that's the Western point of view. Now, all of this is important. And Latino families want this for their children too. But we under this concept of la educación, it's really something a little bit broader. And we really want to challenge this effort to, we don't just want educated young men, because what we find is that sometimes young men that are successful, graduate from high school, they go to college, and then we see high levels of binge drinking and date rape and misogynistic behavior, and they're disconnected from their families. So have we really created a successful young man? And so this aspect of la educación, really we're talking about, well, you can get it, yes, from the educational institutions. But we would emphasize that we need to reinforce, you can get it from your elders and your ancestors too, that within every culture there's wisdom there. You can also get it from life experience, because not everyone grows up with these teachings laid out, but life experience can give you something that can help you and your relationships. Now what we call in Ploke Nawake, the sacred relationships, that gives you life knowledge. And life knowledge, therefore, gives you, if you have life knowledge, it gives you knowledge, skill, and wisdom to be able not only to deal in the school setting, but to deal in the community setting, to deal in your church or faith-based setting, but to deal with people that maybe articulate the same way you do, but maybe those that don't. And when you can do this and be in various settings and in various ways, then you have an honored role, and that people see you with honor, that you know when to speak up and when not to speak up. You know when to share your knowledge and when to just listen to your grandmother tell the same story over and over again. You know how to be with different people, and not only people from your own culture or race, but you know how to honor all people. And that aspect of having those skills and those abilities gives you strength, and internal strength. And the internal strength to even deal with the hard life that sometimes many young people live in, the racism and oppression and the poverty and the struggle of all these things, because what we find is that many young people, when they get confronted with those things, it triggers them in different directions. But that strength is the ability to provide physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually for all your relations, yourself and anyone you're connected to. And that's what we call fulfilling your sacred purpose or destino or success. So that's really what we're lifting up, and we're asking my brother's keeper and all other efforts to really look at there's a difference in construct. And because Latinos, we are the largest number of young men, we believe that this philosophy and this way needs to be at the core, at the base. And we believe that this philosophy also is something that is good for all populations. And that we really want to challenge those that are doing the planning to allow us to be at that table so we can share, because we have 25 years of experience with this. Other national organizations that that do this work as well. Today, we want to share some examples of this as well, because there are proven examples that are going on and have gone on. And if we can move to the next slide, we've asked one of our colleagues and advocates and others to share today, Mr. Sean Arce, who is the co-founder and former director of the nationally renowned and now banned K-12 Mexican American Studies Department in Tucson. In addition to developing the academic literacies among the traditionally marginalized, Mr. Arce's work is centered on the cultural, spiritual, emotional development of Raza youth. And we're really pleased to have Sean with us today. It was important for him to share because they have proven success of what happens when you include education and la educación, the whole aspect of embracing that child and embracing that youth in the midst of sometimes very difficult circumstances. So we want to welcome you, Sean, today, and pleased that you could join us today and just to share some of the work and some of the proven success that you've had.
Gracias. Thank you, Jerry. Yes, again, my name is Sean Arce. I'm about a 20-year public school educator in Tucson, Arizona, and I'm very honored and humbled to be able to present on such a critical topic of Latino education, especially how it impacts our young brothers. I wanted to share some data with you all. This is a Chicano education pipeline, and what it demonstrates is how our children and how particularly Latino male youth are really pushed out of our school system. This comes out every 10 years out of UCLA from the work done by Danny Solorzano and Tarayoso. And as you see, out of every 100 little Chicanitas, Chicanitos, Latino youth, only 46 persist to graduate from high school. And this in fact is a crisis that we're facing. So we have to ask ourselves, what happens to that other 54% that are pushed out of schools? And we have to know through the education literature, through the research, that unfortunately there's been a school to prison pipeline that has been solidified. And many of those 54% unfortunately go into the prison system as a result of being pushed out of school and as a result of missing on those educational opportunities and those limited opportunities because of being pushed out. If we could go to the next slide. And our response to this educational crisis that we're experiencing is to implement and develop and sustain a culturally responsive pedagogy and a curriculum for Chicano Latino youth. And as we see through this curriculum and pedagogy, we address those human measures first and foremost. You know, that development of a strong cultural identity, of a social identity, of a sense of place, a sense of purpose. Also develop those academic identities, a critical outlook, facilitating processes with and for Latino youth, and asking them to be critical, and asking them to not only read the palabra, read the word, but also to read the world. And then we embrace those various assets that our youth bring into the schools, that barrio, that organic intellectualism. With that, we found over a 14-year period that those state measures, those standardized test scores, the college preparation, the college enrollment, skyrocketed through the roof when we addressed those very basic human measures in that cultural, that spiritual, that social development. And fortunately, because of this, we saw a decrease in students who were exposed to such a curriculum, a pedagogy, an educational program, where there were no suspensions or expulsions or pushouts. And we're talking a large number of students, thousands of students over a 14-year period. Next slide, please. Yes. And I know we live in a data-driven society. This was a an audit that was commissioned by the federal court here in Arizona. Many of us know about the controversy here in Arizona where Mexican American studies has been outlawed. So the federal government commissioned a study, and they wanted to see, well, what are the indicators of this program? And as we see, students who are exposed, who went through a program, graduated at much higher rates. Chicanos, Latinos have the second highest next to our Native brothers and sisters in terms of educational achievement. And you see here that 51% of our students in 1 year were more likely to graduate, all the way up to 108% more likely to graduate. And again, this is a rigorous analysis looking at statistical significance, and you see the academic literacy, writing 162% more likely to pass, reading 101% more likely to pass, 168% more likely to pass. So you see these positive indicators through a rigorous study that looks at what happens with Latino youth when they're in a culturally responsive, a socially responsive educational program. Next slide, please. And to kind of sum it up, the discussion from this federal court-ordered study is you see that there is statistical significance, and I'd really like to emphasize the bottom bullet, which states these results suggest that there is a consistent, significant, and we're talking statistical significance, and positive relationship between this culture responsive participation and within these programs and student academic performance. So, in short, students who take these classes fare much better in terms of academics than do students who do not take these classes. Next slide, please. And then in another study commissioned by the state of Arizona, while they were eliminating this program, as you see, students enrolled in our classes graduated at a 97.5% compared to the national average, as you saw earlier, 46%, and compared to 52% within our district. And we are an urban district, so we face many of the same barriers and have many of the same dynamics that other Latino youth experience within an urban educational setting. Another positive indicator is 70% of our students who were enrolled in the program went on to post-secondary education after graduation, compared to the national average for Mexican Americans, which is 26%. Next slide, please. So as we could see, an obvious recommendation is to institutionalize in our urban school districts this data-driven, culturally, historically, and socially responsive curriculum and pedagogy for Raza youth. And as we see this type of a curriculum and a pedagogy really counters those negative trends that our youth are actually forced to experience within our urban public schools, and particularly Raza male youth, because we know the majority of those students who are pushed out of school happen to be young Raza male youth. The second recommendation that we have is really to advance this responsive curriculum and pedagogy, and not for just the development of Raza youth's academic proficiencies, but also, and equally important, is that development of
Sean, thank you very much. We really appreciate that insight into what you're sharing in terms of the experience that you've had in all of these years. And Tony, if we can advance the slide. Hello?
And I believe that is it. Yes.
Okay. You know, what you share really emphasizes really what our grandmothers would really want from us. They would want una persona bien educado, which means that whole person.
Yes.
And now in communities, schools and social institutions many times need to play that role to really fulfill, that dream of our ancestors and of our families. And I want to thank you for all the work that you've done and continue to do, and we'll continue to work this way. There are other examples of the work all across the country. I was just in Denver with Rudy and Anita Gonzalez there, and they have a wonderful school there that does exactly the very same thing, and they're seeing tremendous results as well, and we see these examples across the country, and we want to lift those up as well. So thank you very much, Sean.
Gracias, Jerry.
Okay. We recognize that that there are other issues that when our children struggle in school or struggle in life, it's not just because academically they're not interested or they don't have the ganas, or they don't have. But there are other issues that face families and face communities, and we recognize that families of color face tremendous stressors. And today we have one of our compadres, one of our colleagues, a leader in this field really that has been doing this work for a long time, and from the grassroots level, he does a lot of national work as well. But Luis Cárdenas is currently the Youth Violence Prevention Coordinator for Montgomery County Department of Health and Human Services in Montgomery County, Maryland. Former gang member and ex-offender, turned his life around for being shot 5 times and losing many of his best friends to the life of gangs and crime. And Mr. Cardona has 22 years of experience as gang prevention intervention specialist, both on the domestic international level. And Luis was also a very good father and a good example and good mentor in the community. And we recognize that the diversity within Latino community encompasses a whole lot of communities and a whole lot of different various subcultures. And so we're welcome to have Luis here today to share some of his knowledge and experience. Welcome, Luis.
Thank you very much, Uncle Jerry. Always an honor to serve and to be able to share a lot of the great work that's going on around the country. So in the best interest of time, I'm going to try to fly through my slides as fast as possible. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Montgomery County perspective on Latino males. A couple of challenges here. One of which that has been talked about, and Sean just did a great job breaking it down for us, is that the academic achievement gap of Latinos has contributed to low graduation rates here in Montgomery County. That's based on the 2013 Montgomery County Council Office of Legislative Oversight report that you see the links listed there. In addition, one of the interesting things here from Montgomery County, unlike older, more established Latino communities around the country, we have noticed that here in the county since 2000, the Latino community has been the largest growing ethnic group at 29%. A lot of these findings are again listed in the Latino Youth Collaborative report, which I'll talk about in a second. And the majority of Latinos in the county are foreign-born, 65% of them, as a matter of fact. One of the important things that I've been taking note of for the past couple of years, and not just myself, but many of the community-based providers, health and human services agencies, school system support services, and programs have experienced significant increases of unaccompanied minors. And children that have migrated here and experienced major reunification issues with their families, as well as exposure to multiple trauma, both in the country of origin, which in our case happens to be mostly out of Central America, the countries of El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, in the migration here. And once they get here, in their attempt to navigate family life, school, systematic and social environments, that process is not a very welcoming process, or is actually very complex. So as a result, we have identified a major need to help this growing number of Latinos, especially males, that seem to be the majority of the unaccompanied minors that we've seen. That need means that we have to provide them with the safe space to heal from this trauma. It should be noted that the Federal Department of Health and Human Services, along with the Council of Catholic Bishops, a couple months ago, acknowledged that over they're estimating that 60,000 unaccompanied minors will be coming to the country this year alone. This new reality poses a new set of complex realities for every major system that serves Latino males and youth throughout this nation. So the question is, what's been our response here in Montgomery County? So in light of the many findings in the Latino Youth Collaborative Report, Montgomery County Department of Health and Human Services, along with several other county agencies, have taken some immediate action steps to respond to the complex needs of the youth in general. And these are some of the outcomes. For instance, in 2013, having recognized all these trends of trauma that we were seeing, we had one of our positive youth development programs called the Street Outreach Network. It's comprised of a cadre of outreach workers that engage high-risk gang-involved youth both in the schools and in the community. We had the entire team trained in Juvenile. In addition to the Street Outreach Network, we also had several community-based youth opportunity center staffs and high school-based wellness center staff from a nonprofit called Identity. It does a lot of work within the Latino community here in the county. Also, we had several staff from the recreation department trained in that curriculum as well. At this point now, the Juvenile program, the curriculum, has been implemented in schools throughout the community. The programs help these programs to reduce suspension rates and arrest rates for Latino males as well. And in partnership with other agencies, our school-based health centers, our school-based wellness centers, high school wellness centers, that is, our English as second language programs, and community partners, we've been engaging many of the parents of these Latino males to help support the beginning of the healing process. And this is very critical for us in light of the fact of many of the reunification issues that we see. I spoke to a mother the other day, and she was telling me on Sunday, her children gave her a cake with a question mark, and she asked them, well, what's this cake with the question mark for? And the thing was that the children were asking her, we put the question mark because we want to make sure you remembered the last time we all celebrated Mother's Day together, which was 11 years ago. So one of the interesting things that should be noted is that we have seen several parallel successful outcomes within the Central American community, but even with our African American males, which speaks to the cultural competency. Real quickly, the Latino Youth Collaborative, it was a group that was brought together by the county executive, other elected officials, school board, and community nonprofits to come up with an assessment of the challenges that many of the Latino youth here in Montgomery County were dealing with, and to make several recommendations. Now, let's talk about our impacts in terms of how Cultura, Cura has had an impact in our community. And that's in fiscal year 13, alone out of the 382 youth served through the Street Outreach Network, 70% of them being males, and only 33 of them were rearrested, and 16 were resuspended in schools. In this current year, out of the 394 youth that we were serving, 64% being males, only 8 have been rearrested and 22 resuspended. We continue to see increases in coping skills by the Latino males that we serve in our culturally based programs that focus on transformation. And again, as I mentioned before, the same holds true for the African American males that we work with. We have seen that parents, some school and community-based educators and practitioners have even begun to strengthen and develop the skill set to better respond to the needs of Latino youth, and particularly young men that have suffered so much trauma in their life. And this has been a direct result of several of the Cultura, Cura workshops that we've provided for parents, for young men, for young women. And we are even systematically now working with our ESOL department to help the ESOL department and their counselors and resource teachers begin implementing these type of approaches. One thing that I think is really important for us to take into consideration, and I'm glad that Jerry acknowledged this, Cultura, Cura is not a new phenomenon. As Jerry mentioned, there are several organizations that are part of the National Compadre Network that have been doing this work for over 30 years. I mean, you have organizations like Barrios Unidos in Santa Cruz, California, La Placitas Institute out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, the Achuchas in LA, as well as Homies Unidos. So for folks who are listening, this work has been going on for a long time. And I think it's very important for us to understand that we have been having some great outcomes for a long time as well. So I want to close out by making a couple of recommendations. First and foremost, that it is my hope that my Brother's Keeper initiative, along with all of us who are stakeholders in these issues, that we need to continue to develop a better understanding of the level of trauma that so many Latino youth face due to social, historical, and systemic trauma, and provide resources to build the capacity of organizations and communities to provide culturally based healing support. And I know often we hear about this context called being cultural competent, but as Jerry has so eloquently said on many occasions, it's not about cultural competency, it's about cultural humility, and let's not lose sight of that. So we also want to recommend the capacity to embrace the needs of immigrant and unaccompanied minor youth, and those youth that are returning from juvenile justice facilities to integrate in a positive way back into our communities. We cannot afford to lose sight of how we also engage those young men in the adult criminal justice system, for they also will have and continue to have a huge impact on our communities as well. And lastly, I caution all of us as we talk about these challenges that we must be extremely careful as we educate our systems and the general public to not look at these challenges from the lens of fear, or as if these young boys are liabilities or enemies to society. We must embrace them for all the light they bring to our nation. And I want to thank you for that opportunity to share these points.
Thank you, Luis, and especially that last point of us recognizing, our young people as lights, as opportunities as the subsequent leaders. And under that philosophy, he referred to the philosophy of la cultura, Cura, which translated means culture cures, but really what it means is that the philosophy that within every individual, within every family, within every community, within everyone's cultural history, are the values, traditions, customs, and resiliency factors that can lift up and move us to the next generation of being hombres nobles, of being honorable men as well. So thank you very much, Luis. Appreciate that. We want to move on to now look at and Luis talked about many of these young people that are traumatized and get lost, and when they're not embraced in a good way, and they end up in our juvenile justice system, and we really want to really emphasize the need for this transformation of the juvenile justice system as well. And today we have a comadre and colleague and a really expert in this area as well today, Maestra Rincón Gallardo, who is the founder and president of Olin Associates, an MSW by profession, but having worked in the national, state, and local arena of detention reform and racial equity for youth of color and their families for the last 15 years. Chicana, Mexicana, Indígena, and mother of 2 children, and nana to 1 grandbaby. So, Comadre Macia, thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, sound good.
Okay, good. Kualitlanesi, good morning. Good day to everyone. I'm really honored to be here with our colleagues and then you here that are on this webinar. I prepared a couple of slides to provide you with the most basic introduction today to the status of Latino youth and males in the juvenile justice system. I want to share a couple of charts of data and those data regarding Latino males detained and confined across the nation. I'm also going to touch briefly upon detention reform work that, as Jerry has mentioned, a couple of other colleagues have mentioned, there's been real successful work in detention reform for the past 20 years, and that this has an implication as we talk about the success of Latino male youth involved in the juvenile justice system. I also then, as the last couple of slides, will introduce what we here at Olin Associates in partnership with the National Compadres Network, the California Endowment, and then of course MIRPA, we've developed as the new Latino approach that we are naming Noxtin, Equal Justice for All of Us. I want to start by grounding us in the macro picture, that part of the story that tells us that every population, every race, ethnicity has strengths that we honor, acknowledge, and uplift. Among the Latino population, our young men have cultural strengths, protective factors, such as having palabra, being a young man of his word, being protectors of their familias, and stepping up, being present for the important milestones in their lives, coming of age to represent themselves, their familias, their communities, such as these young men from Milpa working in Monterey County. Recent research identifies cultural strains as attributes towards what is called the Latino paradox. And I'll come back to this paradox towards the end of my presentation. But what you see here in this first chart speaks to the numbers of the overall 2011 US population and the fast-growing Latino population. Using US Census data, the overall total 2011 US population was 316,128,839, of which 53, more or less 54 million are Latino of all races. Underneath that, you have youth ages 10 to 17, and this is the pool of youth that could be referred to and taken to a detention facility. The total is 33,447,302, of which for Latino youth, it is 7,335,829, or 22% for all boys and girls combined. In a one-day snapshot of residential facilities across the nation in 2011, this is the most recent data from the federal government, total male youth confined in all placements were 53,079, of which 12,411 were Latino males, equivalent to 23% of all male youth in detention on that given day. Given these numbers, one would say, there is so little to no disproportionality among Latino male youth in detention. Disproportionality, again, defined as having a greater percentage of youth in detention than what is in the general population. But let us remember that Latinos still get counted as whites in many jurisdictions or counties around this nation. And so this count is most likely very low, and that there are various measures by which we can analyze if and to what extent disproportionality exists. You can look at raw numbers, percentages, or rates. However, these measurements do not tell us if and to what extent disparity issues exist. Disparity is defined as controlling for the same offense, a white youth gets a release, and for a Latino youth, he or she gets detained. For issues of disparity, there is a need to dig deeper into your local data. And for now, I would like to show you the next slide, which has national rates. If we can move to the next slide. On this chart, you will see that the disproportionate rates of youth detained are, percentages here, well, let me back up. Unlike the percentages where you may think that Latino youth represent 22% of total 10 to 17 age youth in the population, and then Latino youth represent 23% youth in detention, that we stated that this doesn't look like a whole lot of disproportionality. The rates here in this chart tell us something different. And in fact, it tells us that we must go deeper into this data. The way that this reads is that for every 100,000 Latinos, 78 are in detention as compared to 33 white youth per 100,000 white youth. At the state, and more importantly at your local level, it's important for you all to ask the questions, to review the raw numbers, percentages, and rates of Latino youth detained. To address issues of disparity that we talked about a little bit a few minutes ago, I offer up the work of a colleague of ours from Campaign for Youth Justice, which begins to address the types of disparities found for Latino youth in the juvenile justice system. The data shows Latino youth are 4% more likely than white youth to be petitioned, 16% more likely than white youth to be adjudicated delinquent, 28% more likely than white youth to receive out-of-home placement, and 43%, what a whopping 43%, more likely than white youth to be waived into the adult system. It is in counting Latinos as whites, it is in counting Latinos not as whites that we begin to see a clear picture of what is the status of Latino males. To know if they are low, medium, or high risk, overridden at high rates to be then detained, we must be data-driven, and know how to change policy. In this time period there be such a decrease? One response could be that the crime rate has been decreasing steadily for the past decade. And the second response could be is that in the late 90s, there had been several several initiatives of detention reform that were initiated, and that some of these programs and initiatives have actually had some extensive and proven success in detention reform and racial and ethnic disparities. And some of these colleagues of ours, most notably the Annie Casey Foundation, JDI Initiative, Models for Change, and the Burns Institute, have had such success. Much has been accomplished in these past 10 years, and many more youth are not sitting in detention. However, if you were to look at that slide, which is not showing on my my page, you would see, there it is, okay, you would see in this slide that, in fact, Latino youth are still very much overrepresented, that they are found in confinement at twice the rate as white youth. Okay, moving on to the last slide. If you could move to the next slide, thank you. I want to briefly introduce our work that is new to this field, and it is called the work of Noxtin, Equal Justice for All of Us. Juan will speak more to this pilot that we are working with in Monterey County, yet for now, I wanted you to know that this is the new intersection of each one of these four directions. One, the fundamental foundation of civic engagement by Latino youth and families. Two, the healing informed La Cultura, Cura aspect that is needed to begin and or to do detention reform in Latino communities. Three, doing detention reform in Latino communities across the nation, everywhere from Nebraska to New York to Georgia, Washington, and the Southwest. And four, the mostly neglected area, that of Latino research, policy and evaluation, which requires funding, yet we understand that this is an essential aspect to push forth the specific needs and not what's usual, which is the one-size-fits-all aspect to address our communities. As I mentioned earlier, there's the Latino paradox, which was coined by Dr. David Hayes Bautista. And this paradox states that although Latinos have less insurance, less education, and lower income levels, Latinos have a longer life expectancy than Anglos by 5 years, and longer than African Americans by about 8 to 9 years. Immigrant Latinos have less detrimental health indicators than first, second, third, and so on and so forth generation Latinos. For many of us doing this healing informed work, that is this type of La Cultura, Cura work, then this type of research about the Latino paradox affirms that cultural strengths, La Cultura, Cura, culture heals, is really in the right place in this paradigm. Therefore, we're saying that to do detention reform in Latino communities, if you were to do them without these four directions, will most likely produce an absence of Latinos at the table in their engagement and in the deeper benefits of reform for youth and families involved within the juvenile justice system. Last, I wanted to state that as Chief Justice Sonia Sotomayor and Betita Martinez, two of our most cherished Latino leaders, have stated, that righting wrongs takes a toll on us as human beings. And so for those of us who work in the field of juvenile justice, those of us who are staff, stakeholders, advocates, we too must find places for sacred healing. Unless we allow ourselves to become hardened and not able to see the strengths that we all bring to the work, more importantly, for the work yet to come. I leave you then with these recommendations. Number one, transformational healing and trauma-informed approach is essential. Civic engagement and movement building, being data-driven, and building on models such as Joven Noble and La Cultura Cura that have already been proven to work, such as the JDAI initiative that has also had much success and proven existence in juvenile detention reform. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Marcia. And, and I will just, lift up a lot of the work that you're doing and that we're collaboratively doing. And, some of the things that you said sparked, that this youth population we find now is the largest number of men going into federal prison are Latino men. And so what the percentages don't show are the aggregate numbers, because since we have such a large population, our aggregate numbers, even though the percentages may not look that way, we really have a disproportionate number of Latinos going into the system, and they stay in the system as well. I think the other thing that you point to is the importance of transforming the system itself. And
Correct.
So we're really looking at how do we transform these systems. How do we transform probation? How do we transform and begin to work with law enforcement, educational assistance, mental health, all these systems that really are the entry point for a lot of our youth that are really in trauma and pain. So thank you very much. Next, we are very pleased to have us today Juan Gomez, who is one of the leaders, the young leaders in this effort, and Juan is going to talk about how this work transforms at the local level, because again, it is about healing, and it is about education, but then it's about creating leaders in our community that can speak up, have voice, and can really move against those things that are moving against communities and families, and moving for the assets in the next generation. Juan is part of the National Compadres Network, a senior trainer and program associate, and he works on developing culturally grounded movement strategies. He's also a policy analyst and co-founder of MILPA, based in Salinas, which functions as an intergenerational collective that is braiding the wisdom of elders into a modern-day health equity framework that makes sense for this generations and communities of color in general. So Juan, thank you for being here and to share your palabras and experience.
Palabra, this is Juan Gomez. I feel really honored to be here because a lot of this work has been building for some time now, allowing for this moment to take place, specifically within juvenile justice. And I'm specifically thinking of some of the work of Frank Villarruel and Donde Está la Justicia, Juan Sanchez and Raquel Mariscal, because they really pioneered a lot of the work that has allowed us to even talk about juvenile justice within a cultural context, and we just wanted to add to that in a good way and really focus kind of on the health, healing, and equity part of juvenile justice and its responsibility to it. And I think what we have here is something really exciting, innovative, thrilling, that is really, it's going to cross and address this black-white binary that we're functioning on, which is really hurting us all. Because we're not trying to live in a colorblind society anymore. We're trying to live in a colorful society, because that's how this generation is looking. We're going to look in all shapes and sizes. This first slide, I wanted to call it the Juvenile Justice League of Monterey County. As you can see, this is really multicultural, interdisciplinary, intergenerational. Folks range from 17 to 45 years old. We have a PhD candidate, a social worker, a college youth, a father, and the list goes on. And the importance of this picture is because on April 22nd of this year, after 6 months of a lot of working, mobilizing, and organizing, we were able to get our Board of Supervisors unanimously bring down the bed number from 150 beds to 120 beds for a proposed juvenile hall facility. And that for us, it was not enough. For the Board of Supervisors, that was not enough. They also said that we have to update a needs assessment. So really what's been happening here is it's not just about people on the ground or in systems. I mean, there's been a whole community being awoken across the state through this approach of La Cultura, Cura. And in places like Monterey County, we didn't wait for the state or other federal agencies to bring us a grant. We literally picked ourselves up from our bootstraps and really showed this community determinism, striving for excellence and accountability and equity we're not take anything less than that. You know, because for us, juvenile justice and the transformation, not just the reform of it, has to be from the ground up. You know, for us, we were lucky that we're able to be informing not just the construction, the design, but also the use. So, Derek, you can pass to the next slide. Can you pass to the next slide, please? Okay, so once again, is how do you translate this work to the ground, and knowing that there's a new era in this movement building? I do believe that right now we're experiencing a next generation civil rights movement. And I think that in California, where you have the Alliance for Boys and Men of Color, you're seeing the work of La Cultura, Cura in many of its sites. And not just in California, but in places like Denver and Baltimore and San Antonio and other places across the nation. But for us in Monterey County, La Cultura, Cura has really allowed the transformational process to begin by literally braiding and blending the wisdom of elders and experts of color, and not necessarily by their skin tone, but by their consciousness and ability to be transparent and, once again, govern for equity and excellence. La Cultura, Cura has allowed a community that's an agricultural community to awaken with its own internal vitality, its resilience. From that moment on, we've really created a platform to not just advocate from a place of being wounded, but of a place of resilience and medicine. And that literally has allowed us to be kind of in this movement. And this movement that sees the niche social justice that is really founded on the social determinants of health. And, you know, usually they talk about education and workforce, the built environment, but for us, it was really around the healing, and that we had to braid the culture with consciousness that's political and critical. And we had to start to decolonize the knowledges, processes, and mechanisms that often silo us into just working with at-risk youth, or, you know, you want to sometimes dress it up and call it youth-led. Well, we're not about being youth-led. We're about being youth-inclusive, because we understand it takes young people, it takes residents, it takes system leaders, it takes board of supervisors, it takes advocates, planners to be part of this process. And once again, it was not enough, because we understand that sometimes even between culture and community, mobilizing, organizing a collective, it's not enough. So we need to, what do we do with that? So we're like, well, in juvenile justice, we know that the pipeline oftentimes goes through the juvenile justice system. So for us, juvenile justice, we had to really look at moving just beyond, you know, calling out disparity and inequity. A lot of times people come at jurisdiction with, look, all the things you're doing wrong. But we really wanted to focus with the opportunities, the resilience, and the equity that's actually, if you dig enough into some of these people, some of these systems work, you're seeing that they're actually trying to do good things, but a lot of the times, the way that RFPs and RFAs or whatnot are written really constrict their ability to do the right thing. So we've had to be really careful and strategic and disciplined on how we move around this. So for us in juvenile justice, we really wanted to transform the whole narrative around it, that it's not just about juvenile justice, you know, and just changing the system, you know, but for us it was to train the staff in adequate culturally based trauma and healing informed work, you know, to update assessments that really speak to with the specific focus on cultural factors. In our county, it has to be Latinos. It's the largest population there, you know, and all this, you know, once again, we break this into this health equity framework because we really brought together the best of the best, you know, and literally starting to build up a lexicon around what systems change means, not just on at the top, but also in the ground, and building a lexicon and openly struggling in collaboration, dialogue, but with trust that together we can make this happen. So I just want to say that much in that end.
Next slide. Tony.
You know, and this story really kind of came about, and it's twofold. One of it is East Salinas is part of the Building Healthy Communities site of the California Endowment, and although a lot of the sites function under the theory of change of, you know, really creating resident youth-driven power and collaboration with systems, that ours actually has taken an approach to really invest in the natural human intellectual capital that exists, and really seeing that there's college students, there's returning inmates, there's grandparents, there's children that want change and transformation, and to really fund that, not just funding, mediocrity, but funding excellence and stuff that's really going to transform the way that the community also engages in this process. So this is not just enough about funding system. This is about we're funding a movement. Next slide. In the next slide, we're going to talk about kind of the social historical context of how we even got here. So even though this work around juvenile justice for us specifically kind of came about in the last year, it really was inspired and developed by the work of La Cultura, Cura, which developed a tri-county network in these 3 counties, Monterey, Santa Cruz, and San Benito. And over a 5-year span, and it's really a multi-tiered strategy that's informing a broader systems change. And we've been able to have people trained all the way from probation officers, teachers, residents, artists, advocates in this process to begin the internal shift in the dialogue that will allow for a more easier accessible dialogue to take place. And that when our people are at the table with the board of supervisor, with the assemblyman, with other folks, that they're not reacting, actually responding with an informed dialogue. Because a lot of our people in the movement, especially with the trauma and all these other factors and challenges, sometimes they're tired, they're stuck, they don't know what to do. So La Cultura Cura really started a base, and that work, if you look in places like Stockton with Fathers and Families of San Joaquin, in Oakland with United Roots, you start seeing these type of same kind of work happening when you're tying culture, consciousness into movement building. And for us here locally, once again, in Salinas, Milpa is really, we had to start motivating individual leadership for public advancement, because we know everybody has a purpose in this movement. And we do function as an intergenerational think tank of men and women. I know that we're talking about my brother's Keeper initiative, and it's often type of focus on boys and young men of color, but really understand that women are there all the time, sometimes in front of us, sometimes in back of us, but we want to be in the side of us, because we have to pay attention to it. So when we do this, that we should also have a lens that focuses on girls and women of color. Once again, for us, it's not so much about skin tone, it's about consciousness, and that we do something that really focuses on lifting up this work of being healing informed. It's obvious, I'm hoping that folks from the Obama administration are looking at this webinar, that this work really lifts all boats. It's really, this is a driving force, and everybody is feeling this approach. It's evidence-based. We thought 500 years of history, thousands of years of history was enough, but we decided, let's go through the whole rigor and of being evidence-based. So this is a process that's proven, and do I have another slide?
I don't know this guy.
Yeah,
really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it. I just want to mention, you mentioned health equity, because these stressors really affect us in a whole lot of different ways. You can move the next slide, Tony. And what we're seeing is issues of health issues in our communities, high rates of diabetes, high rates of eating disorders and problems with liver and kidney issues and gastrointestinal issues in our kids. And those things are not because of poor eating habits, those are because of stress levels, because of things that are going on that we're really not looking at. And so we also have to look at the health issues that are going on. We recognize that this effort of my brother's Keeper, has a tremendous influence by foundations. And philanthropy is very, very key, and we know that a number of foundations have lifted up directly African-American academic achievement, and that's really important, because our African-American brothers really need, there's a tremendous amount of need there and trauma there as well, and we work together and collaborate with them all the time. But we're really challenging the Latino, the philanthropic organizations to really look at the total needs. And so today we have, with us representing, philanthropy, but also representing, that the aspect of knowledge and wisdom is Lacey Maria Cerros, and she's a Northeast He's program manager for Hispanics in Philanthropy based in the organization's New York office. The native of California, Lacey has over 10 years of experience working nonprofit sector with a comprehensive background in community organizing, public advocacy, and strategic grant writing. Thank you, Lacey, for being here.
Thank you, Jerry, and National Compadres Network, Congressman Tony Cardenas, and the other panelists today. I come here as a collaborative partner and the Northeast manager at HIP, but really I come here as a young woman who grew up with her grandfather and father and 9 uncles and a bunch of young men, cousins, to really share my experience and lift up the work of HIP and the other groups on the ground to really understand fully how My Brother's Keeper can embrace Latino males. So thank you all again. I'm Lacey Cerros with Hispanics in Philanthropy, which is a 30-year-old membership organization. We work really hard, small shop, but we work really hard to strengthen Latino communities by increasing resources, Latino participation and leadership throughout the field of philanthropy, and really to foster policy change that can enhance true equity and inclusiveness of all people. Today, I plan to share a little bit, very quickly, about the role of philanthropy and some of the recommendations from HIP's recent report on Latino men and boys. The role that philanthropy has taken thus far, many of us know, within the Men and Boys of Color movement, has been seen far and wide, from the Executives Alliance to the Sons and Brothers social media campaign to the focus and the hot topic of many national conferences this year. A lot of foundations are providing funding and partnering in new ways, as we can see with My Brother's Keeper, but there is still great need, and many of the groups in our report and the groups that are providing on-the-ground support to men and boys of color are creating real-time, innovative solutions, but they still need additional support to do more. For example, we've heard all today a lot about the work, the data, the NCN's focus on healing, but I question, where is the funding for healing specifically? Philanthropy really should expand current efforts to build the capacity of small local organizations, a lot of whom and with HIP supports and works with, but also fund the mobilizing and the movement building and the civic engagement, that integrated holistic approach. I just want to share very quickly about HIP's Latino Men and Boys initiative. We're extremely excited. We're proposing a really bold initiative to help Latino men and boys overcome and remove a lot of the barriers that's been put up by the various structures by borrowing from our own experience. We've had many years of experience grant making to smaller, on-the-ground, Latino-led, Latino-serving organizations, and we are proposing to serve as this backbone organization, which we've done very successfully over the years, working with local funders, national funders, grantees, and academicians and consultants. It's a very comprehensive approach, so that we can push this national collaborative that will build a knowledge base about what works, that will continue to make connections and refine our own toolkits that we know best, and that will build a movement for racial healing. This national effort will invest in priority areas, which I will go over next in the next slide. So in an effort to showcase some of the winning strategies employed by these Latino-led, Latino-serving nonprofits, many of whom are grantees of HIPs, places like Silver City, North Carolina, Denver, Colorado, Durham, North Carolina, Santa Cruz. You know, we collaborated with several consultants. We worked with TCE. They invested in us to help develop a philanthropic brief called The Right to Dream, Promising Practices, Improve Odds for Latino Men and Boys. And we did that to really inform the field, to raise awareness, to understand where we sit, who we work with, how we feel philanthropy should be investing. The brief was recently released in March, so it's very recent, and it is in English and in Spanish, which was really important for us, so that folks, I encourage you all to go to our website, download it in English and Spanish, and utilize it with your communities, so that is accessible for all. It outlines 5 priority investment areas that we believe will really help remove some of the structural barriers. The first is real brief, Our Economy's Missing Middle, which explores how trends that have squeezed communities of color out of the missing class were accelerated during the Great Recession. The second is our Broken Education to Employment Pipeline, which looks at educational systems and accountability-focused reforms that have underserved young men of color and pushed them out of the school to career pipeline. The third is that too many men of color are missing. It explores the inequitable incarceration rates of Latino and African American Latino men, as well as the risk of dying from violence, which we've heard about today. The fourth is Where We Live is Killing Us, which explores how where we live shapes our life expectancies. I'm from the Central Valley in California. High rates of asthma, cancer clusters. They really want to look at how to address the cultural barriers to health access. And finally, Searching for a Stable Foothold Despite Disruptive Immigration Policies, which explores how the shifting legal context really impacts how Latino men envision, how they plan for, and how they really work towards a quality future of the United States. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thanks. So the report also identifies 6 winning strategies employed by a lot of the nonprofits that we highlighted, but also across the nation, across the country, and across continents. It highlights promising practices across multiple sectors, and we really want to provide you with these 6 strategies to consider for philanthropy for you all to understand how these, if we were to structure investments in these 5 priority areas, we really think the strategies that are listed here should be a roadmap. We talked about intergenerational relationships. The models build on and reinforce Latino cultural competencies, informing and maintaining these intergenerational relationships. Building on the importance of families, really, a lot of the promising practices profiled in the report, they take into account and build on the important role of family in the lives of Latino men and boys. I think we all can relate to that and really can attest to how important families are for all of us. Third, civic engagement. The programs that we highlight talk about how we provide youth with the support they need to identify and analyze and address instances of adjustments and how powerful and engaged that can be for a lot of our youth. Partnerships with public systems. Again, a lot of these Latino-led, Latino-serving nonprofits, as they're maturing, they're forging equal partnerships with public systems that really bring needed services to their constituents. And by doing that, they are reinforcing the importance of cultural identity, sensitivity. They really help Latino young men and boys learn about the history of the United States, about Latin America, really to counter some of the alienating effects of the predominant Euro-American curriculum. And finally, addressing immigration status. Promising practices identified in the report, and again, not isolated to the report, but really a sample of what the work is being done on the ground across the country. Take into account the immigration status of Latino men and boys and help to increase the stability of their lives despite the plethora of uncertainties caused by the shifting legal context. So next slide, please, just to finish up, to recommend 2 quick things. Again, building that knowledge base about what works. You know, we really want to support and work together to increase support for monitoring and evaluation of groups whose work is innovative and really responsive to the community and culturally relevant and sound, so that the effective data collection and analysis can lead to proven impact of what we know in philanthropy as best practices. We really want to ensure that folks are set up for success. And then finally, building a movement for racial healing, you know, supporting and working together to create these learning communities that focus on Latino men and boys, but that purely facilitate connections between organizations as they work together to refine, to understand, to apply effective strategies across the country. We want to lift up all of the work, and we want to ensure that the approaches are integrated and that can lead to creating system change. And then to finish, supporting bridge building between advocacy and membership organizations, really to continue to build upon, wide out, a grassroots movement that can address the shared structural inequities faced by all men of color. So to finish, finally, the last slide, just quickly, if for those of you that are seeing the slides, here are the links to download our report in English and Spanish. You can always find out more information about Hispanics and Philanthropy and what we're doing, but I want to just genuinely say thank you for having me here today. Thank you for all of everyone on the panelists and then on the audience, what you're doing for your communities, because it truly will take all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Lacey, so much for all the work that HIP does and that you do, and you know, also for just sharing the how all this work is very personal to us, and you're sharing about, you know, the men in your life that have influenced you as well, and just want to recognize that really all of this is very personal for all of us, and it's not just policies and not just programs, but it's about the lives of many of our family members and about us as well. So thank you once again very much. We want to move to in the last part and just kind of lift up some of the things that are already going on. If you can move to the next slide, the National Compadres Network. We've been doing this work for a while now, and one of the things that through some support from Kellogg and the California Endowment, we began a number of years ago, even though we've been doing this work for over 25 years and really have been doing this work. We wanted to really organize it and recognize that even though our focus really and what we work with are youth in general, that a lot of our work in communities we get called to work with Latino youth, but we recognize that in order for us to really lift this work up, that we needed to come together as a larger entity. And so we launched this National Boys and Men of Color Institute a couple of years ago. And the focus of it is it's a multi-tiered national effort that's focused on working with communities to pull themselves from their rootstraps. And we talked about cultural identity as being key, understanding your history, the legacy, through engaging elders, leading experts, system leaders, community-based agencies that have a vested interest in improving the lives of boys and men of color. And some of the panelists mentioned a number of people that have been doing this work, that continue to do this work. And Nana Alejandro's in Santa Cruz, and Isaac Cárdenas in San Antonio, and we have a whole number of people. We have tremendous knowledge. Bob Arnold in Oakland, and Greg Hodge, and a number of people. Charles Johnson in L.A. We have a whole number of people all across the country, and so we're looking. And we're asking elders to speak up, to begin speaking this knowledge, because a lot of young men don't have elders. Their fathers or grandfathers have been lost, have been deported, have been locked up, and so we need the elders to come out, the elders that exist, to begin speaking the knowledge. We need fathers, because this is not just about boys, it's about fathers. Young men need fathers, and where their fathers don't exist, then we as men need to stand up as uncles. And so we need fathers to stand up so the young men will show up. But that we can get them to show up with honor, respect, trust, and dignity. And that's really important, because a lot of young men have not don't know the example of what honor, respect, trust, and dignity. They have a false sense of what that means. And so we lift up this healing generations. And that really includes the whole comprehensive aspect of raising young men to be honorable men. If you can go to the next slide, Tony. This effort really shows that we can come together. So even though we are really emphasizing Latino males, that in the end we must come together. We must come together, Latinos and Native and Asian, African American, and even our European brothers too, because there's a number of that population too that are struggling. That we must come together. But now we must come together under a different philosophy, and we believe that our ancestral wisdom that we have in our community lifts up not just something good for us, but good for all populations. And this is a picture of one of the gatherings and really this sprung up out of some issues that came up between black-brown youth. There was some violence that came up, and everybody was going to the youth to try and handle them. And we said, no, we must come together as elders, because if we men and elders cannot get along and cannot share and be at the same table and can be collaborative, then the youth are just following our example. So in this effort of My Brother's Keeper, we need to ensure that we have elders and spokespeople that are guiding this with equal power and equal voice. Let's move on. This Healing Generations framework places culture and healing at the center, because we recognize identity is important. It prioritizes intergenerational focus on elders, fathers, and extended kinships or compadres. Unfortunately, in many of the movements, we focus just on youth-led youth, but youth don't live by themselves. They go home to families and sometimes to single mothers, and they live in communities. And we must really enlist that total community and bring them out of the shadows and heal them so they can really do their role. Implement long-standing traditional wisdom of elders and círculos. We have to have circles where we used to have extended kinship before. Some people remember years ago when the community was a community, and lift up the principles of el hombre noble, which is the honorable by young men. A lot of young men don't know what that means. Next slide. Tony, next slide. So you see here, and let's move to the next one, here's a gathering, and there's a gathering that we came together that way to begin looking at these strategies. Let's keep moving, Tony. We're running close to time here. Multi-tiered effort to help build a common voice that advocates for culturally based trauma-informed healing centers, to develop local and nationally culturally informed fatherhood and male involvement programs and policies, and advance in intergenerational healing where communities can coalesce a common voice. That's what we're doing now, and that's what we need to do. We have a strategy that we're asking, philanthropic organizations and the federal government to support. That will include all these entities. That will include Latinos, include African Americans, include Native population, include our Asian brothers and sisters, and even our European brothers, and so that we can come together and move this. And we understand that there's specific needs in each community. Keep moving, Tony. So through this institute, we are developing, and with the support, we can develop local and national experts and advisors and elder networks. We need the wisdom keepers to come together so that agencies and organizations and systems can't say we don't know what to do. Because we know what to do with our young people. The elders of color, men of color, and even the youth of color now know. We want to collect and disseminate trauma and healing informed theoretical interventions and best practice programs. But we need to develop a funding base too that can do that. So move to the next slide. And so part of this we can see how we can laugh together, how we can come together, foundation leaders and here, and we can keep moving, towards a collective, a movement on this. We provide community healing and leadership development, community organizational capacity building, policies and services to promote system change, and we have evidence-based curriculum. Joven Noble is the only Latino-based, evidence-based curriculum that exists in the country right now. And we have that, and it's working throughout the country. So move to the next slide. And so we want to lift that up and begin to move that along with some of the great things that other organizations are. Keep moving, Tony. So there's a number of initiatives that we have, and in the interest of time, I'm just going to pass through these real quickly to move to the whole list of curriculums that are available, that are bilingual, bicultural, and that are available now. We don't have to look for resources. We don't have to look for methodology. We have this. We're working in schools. We're working in a number of juvenile justice institutions and continuation schools, work in community health organizations, and we have a health focus too. We have a whole series of brochures and information on all these different topics. Let's move to the next slide. It seems like our time is out for questions and answers, but you can reach us. We'd like to ask you to visit my Brother's Keeper website, and it's listed there. We'd like to ask you to go there and write in there. There's a place where you can write, reinforce the need for the services for Latino males of color that include character development, trauma-informed healing-centered services that support young men's total development, support the NCN's National Boys and Men of Color Institute, and with its evidence-based curriculum, and support the need for funding of long-standing grassroots community-based efforts. There's a number of organizations that are doing great work. They've been doing it for years. We want to get local funding on the ground to fund them. We can provide the capacity building and training, but we need local organizations to be funded as well. Here's what it looks like on the Brother's Keeper. So you can go to that site, and the last one, Tony. Next slide. If you need further information, you can contact us here. And I really just want to thank all of you and for listening, for being part of this, become part of this effort, part of this movement. And I, as we end, I want to apologize if anything we said here offended anybody. My mom would tell me, tienes que tener respeto, you have to respect people, don't offend them. But my dad says tell the truth. And sometimes those two things clash. We attempted to share this in a good, respectful way, honoring the knowledge of all people, our ancestors, and all those people, those advocates, those civil rights people that have come, people of all colors and all ways that have come to lift up these issues for communities. But we attempted to do it in a respectful way. We ask you to join this movement because the young men, young women, the families, the mothers, the fathers, the grandparents, the communities are waiting. They're waiting for us. And we challenge our Brother's Keeper and the federal government. We challenge all the philanthropic organizations to embrace this way because this is a comprehensive way. We thank you all for joining us today, and any other questions or information you can send to our website. We'll be glad to share any information with you want to thank you very, very much and have a blessed day.